Hi there. Let's have a chat about the full moon in Aries happening on October 17th, 2024. While the archetype of Aries can give us a feeling of wanting to fight for things and wanting to stand up for ourselves, it can also make us feel like there are fights in places where things might not really be a fight. We might tend to over exaggerate or really stand up for ourselves almost to a fault. Because of that, because we might be standing up for ourselves and looking out for ourselves, there can be a tendency to act cruel or insensitive. And especially because the full moon will be in the decan ruled by Jupiter, we see all of this being amplified. Whatever the planet Jupiter touches expands and becomes even bigger. So while I do love this Aries energy for us, my word of advice for this full moon is make sure you are fighting for the things that matter and make sure you are standing up in the places and spaces where that matters. One other very important thing to mention about this full moon is that the moon is moving quite fast the days leading up to the fast moon and the days after, faster than it usually does. And whenever we see a fast moon, we see a tendency to jump to conclusions quite quickly and to react and respond in a very quick manner. And while that can be really useful in some situations, like when we are fighting for our lives or in a dangerous situation, in other situations, it might be too harsh or too quick. We might be in a situation where we are required to slow down and think about things before acting on them. So while we will get into what this means for each of the rising signs in just a second, overall, my general vibe for this full moon is, for sure, take this beautiful amplified energy of acting from your instincts, wanting to stand up for yourself, but also take it with a grain of salt. Really ask yourself, is the situation where there is even something to be fought for? Does this matter? And then afterwards, to just pause and think, am I acting a bit harshly? Am I acting a bit too fast? Should I take a second to collect my thoughts and reflect before I go ahead and do something that I might later regret? So all of that being said, let's get into each of the rising signs so that you can apply this in your own specific situation. For those that are Aries rising or an Aries sun sign, this full moon is happening in your first house. So on October 17th, a couple of days before or a couple of days after, you might especially be facing an inevitable event that feels like a threat to your own identity, feels like a threat to the core of your own existence and who you are. You might have taken certain commitments in the past, certain things that you have said, ways that you have acted that are now coming back up again and that you need to face them again. And this time it might feel like they are asking you to fight. They're asking you to step into this Martian energy of the warrior. As I shared earlier with the general forecast, while it can be amazing to stand up for ourselves and definitely for the things that matter to us, just be careful not to turn into fights, things that might not be that important to you or that later might not matter. One good thing though, with the fact that the moon is moving quite fast, is that you can probably react quite quickly to whatever is coming your way. You are able to think of a really good solution very fast, and you're able to act on it because you have this Martian energy of just stepping into your instinct, stepping into that adrenaline, and lifting up immense amounts of weights. This Martian energy is really this idea of when you are in a scary situation and because you have that pump of adrenaline, you can do something that you could never do before, because you have that surge of adrenaline and that surge of, I need to fight for my own life. Now on to Taurus rising or Taurus sun signs. So on October 17th, there might be a certain spiritual commitment that you have made in the past that is coming to a head. And specifically, there might be some sort of inevitable reality, inevitable event that happens that requires you to step more into the spiritual side of you, that requires you to acknowledge that there is so much beyond just our human body, that maybe even forces you to let certain things go that no longer belong to your life. Because we are talking about an Aries archetype and we are talking about the moon being in the decan ruled by Jupiter, we see that this situation might feel scary. It might feel like there is a threat coming at you. And while you might be able to address it with this sort of adrenaline and instinct, you might be able to react fast. That's amazing. That's a positive. Do keep in mind that whatever is happening might not necessarily be such a huge threat. There might be a part of you that is maybe overdoing it or over escalating the event in your mind. So whatever happens, Taurus, during this full moon on October 17th, I just encourage you to get into a state of flow and a state of allowing things to fall away that no longer belong to your life. And now on to Gemini risings or Gemini sun signs. Geminis, this is happening in your 11th house. So on October 17th, there might be some sort of inevitable event that happens with your friend group or the communities that you belong to. There might also be something that feels like it's quite competitive. Maybe you feel in competition with this group. You feel like you need to stand up for yourself. This is the Martian energy of the warrior that we're talking about after all. And you might be making quite fast decisions because the moon will be moving quite fast. So to whatever is happening around this full moon, you might have a tendency to just react quite quickly. And always, with a full moon, we're talking about a certain crescendo that is being reached, a certain reality or a certain peak, an inevitable peak that is coming up based on certain commitments that we have made in the past. So think about perhaps what has been going on with your community of friends lately, or any commitments that you have made to them. Next, we are talking about Cancer rising or Cancer sun signs. And for you, Cancer, the full moon on October 17th will be happening in your 10th house. And this means that there might be certain commitments that you have made with your career or at your workplace that are coming to a certain fruiting. They are bearing fruit, and it's time for you to eat what you sowed. It could be quite dramatic because we are talking about this Aries energy of the warrior, and the moon will be in the decan ruled by Jupiter. Whatever Jupiter touches, it expands. And specifically during this full moon, you might be facing situations that require for you to stand up for yourself, that require for you to think of yourself as an individual and to, in a way, step into this energy that is a bit protecting and a bit like you always have to look after yourself and worry a little bit less about looking after others. And as I'm sharing with all of the rising signs, we do have a fast moving moon. So while you are able to respond quite quickly to the situation, that can be definitely quite handy. Just be careful not to be looking at things as if they're a fight when actually they're not. Not to be making fights or putting this really like Martian warrior spirit into battles that do not matter. It's almost as if you want to pick just one or two battles at your work that do really matter, that you do really care about, and just fight those with this beautiful, strong Martian energy, and the rest, let them slide. On to Leo risings or Leo sun signs. And for you, Leo, this full moon on October 17th will be taking place in your 9th house. This could mean that on the 17th, a couple of days before, a couple of days after, there is some sort of manifestation in your life that might have to do with travel, might have to do with education, or maybe even with the legal system. We are talking about a Martian energy after all. So what is happening might feel scary. It might feel like it is a battle, and maybe even literally that you have to stand up for your own life. You have to wake up, kick into this adrenaline mode and fight the battle. As I said in the general horoscope, the moon is moving quite fast. So you should be able to respond quickly to whatever is happening. But keep in mind that sometimes responding quickly is what gets us in trouble in the first place. So make sure that if you are stepping into this energy of looking after yourself, standing up for yourself, this energy of responding quickly, that you do it when it matters and when there is really an important moment. Next up, we have Virgo risings and Virgo sun signs. Virgo, this is happening in your 8th house. And on October 17th, you might find that the choices that you have made that have gotten you bonded deeply with another person, you have to all of a sudden face those commitments. You have to face the outcomes of those deep bonds that you have built with someone. Keep in mind that this could be positive. I mean, after all, the moon will be in the decan ruled by Jupiter. However, Jupiter doesn't always have to be positive. Jupiter, in a sense, just expands whatever it touches. So if you have ended up making these bonds with somebody for the wrong reasons or without pure intentions, that Jupiter might just amplify that even more. It could feel like a scary situation. It could feel like you were dropped into a war zone and you need to fight for yourself. And while we are talking about your 8th house where you're relating with somebody else, definitely standing up for ourselves is important in relationships. However, because this is in such a relational house, I do want to give the word of caution that to be really mindful of how and when you're displaying this warrior energy, and that you are really using it on the topics that matter and not just picking fights or making battles where there are no battles to be had. One thing that I haven't mentioned yet with the other zodiac signs, which is actually quite applicable in with a moon in such a relational house, is the fact that a fast-moving moon also means that you say yes more easily. Not only can you react more quickly, but you're also just more agreeable, more open. You say yes when the opportunities present themselves. So do keep in mind that because the moon is moving quite fast, a couple of days before the full moon, it could be these fast responses. It could be these saying yes to somebody, perhaps a little bit too much, that might be the thing that I don't want to say gets you into trouble, but it might be the thing that makes things a little bit more tricky for you during this full moon. Next, we are chatting about Libra rising or Libra sun signs. Libra, this full moon on the 17th of October will be happening in your 7th house. So you, as along with Virgo rising, you are definitely facing some sort of a peak in your relationship. And it could definitely be a peak based on a commitment that you have made to somebody beforehand. The moon is in the decan ruled by Jupiter. So be careful not to add too much drama or blow up things that are just sort of tiny little things and blow them up into this giant war or this giant issue. While I do love to encourage standing up and setting boundaries also in relationships, there is a lot of this Martian energy during this full moon. So that is also a word of advice that I'm giving, not just to you, but to all of the zodiac signs. Now let's have a chat about Scorpio rising or Scorpio sun signs. For you, Scorpio, on October 17th, you are experiencing the full moon in Aries in your 6th house. How this could manifest is that you might be seeing a manifestation come about based on the choices that you have made in the past in regards to your health and to your routine. It could be an adventurous manifestation. It could be a scary manifestation. It could be a manifestation that makes you feel like you are at war and you need to fight. One thing that is quite interesting, specifically for you, Scorpio, is that the moon is moving quite fast, which makes us able to see patterns much more easily and much more clearly. So I do advise for you during this full moon, a couple of days before, a couple of days after, to just pay attention to what are the patterns that you're noticing. Then you can really keep track of what is it perhaps about your routine and about your health that maybe needs to change. Next up, we have Sagittarius rising and Sagittarius sun signs. For you, Sagittarius, this full moon is happening in your 5th house. So on October 17th, you might be experiencing an inevitable event that has to do with your self-expression, your creativity, or maybe even your dating life as well. It could be dramatic. We are talking about the moon being in the decan ruled by Jupiter, after all. But it could also just be a lot of jovial and a lot of excess, because we are talking about Jupiter in the 5th house, after all. So for you, it might be a bit of a different manifestation than for the other zodiac signs. For you, it might especially feel like you are relishing in things, that you are spending and having a good time and enjoying life a little bit more. However, if we are to look at the bigger picture, this is a full moon in Aries, meaning that whatever is manifesting with this full moon, it might feel like a battle, it might feel scary, and it might feel like you really need to stand up for yourself and set boundaries, whether with your creativity, with your dating life, or just in general, your self-expression. Let's have a chat about Capricorn risings and Capricorn sun signs. For you Capricorns, the full moon on October 17th will be happening in your 4th house. So you might be experiencing an inevitable situation with your home, with your family, or in general, more of your emotional safety as well. This might feel quite uncomfortable. We are talking about this Martian energy of going into war in your house of home, family, and emotional safety. That doesn't match. So you might especially feel this as quite jarring compared to the other zodiac signs. And because it might feel jarring, you might especially relate to this fast moving moon, relate to this feeling of wanting to respond quickly. And while responding quickly can be amazing, especially in dangerous situations where our life is at risk or where our boundaries are being crossed, sometimes reacting quickly and swiftly is less of a good idea. So just take note that if you are feeling uncomfortable, you most likely will feel a bit uncomfortable, that sometimes acting quickly and responding quickly doesn't mean that it will necessarily make the situation better or resolve the situation as well. So do take a second to think before doing something or taking an action. Next up, we have Aquarius rising and Aquarius sun signs. Aquarius, the full moon on October 17th is taking place in your third house. So the choices that you have made around your communication, maybe the emails that you have sent, the things you've been typing on social media, are, I don't want to say coming back to bite you, but they are manifesting some fruits. They are coming to bloom, and you are harvesting what you sowed. The moon is in the sign of Aries, so it might feel like there is perhaps a sort of communicative battle or a battle over having said one thing versus another thing being understood. Perhaps feeling like you need to make your words very strong and very evocative during this time. Be very, very mindful not to become insensitive or to become too harsh with the things that you say, because that can be a tendency with a full moon in Aries in your third house. The third house does also represent neighbors and siblings. So it could also be that there are sort of battles that your neighbors or your siblings are fighting around this full moon as well. And finally, one thing I will add for you, Aquarius, for this full moon horoscope. The moon is moving quite fast the days leading up to the full moon, and then it sort of slows down as the full moon passes by. And we are talking about your house of communication after all, so you might especially feel like you want to rush what you say, that you want to talk fast. Maybe you say yes to things without thinking too much. Maybe you write some work emails and send them quite quickly without giving it some thought. And this sort of might aggravate the situation that you're in around this full moon. So just do be very careful. First of all, what battles are you willing to fight? What battles matter? And second of all, be very careful to reflect before you act. And finally, of course, my dear Pisces, why are you always the last one in the list? So sorry about that. But let's talk about Pisces sun and Pisces rising signs. Pisces, the full moon on October 17th, will be happening in your second house. So you will be reaching an inevitable situation. There will be a sort of inescapable manifestation that comes about based on choices that you have made in the past in regards to your finances or in regards to the way you show yourself self-respect. You might have made certain commitments in the past, whether to yourself or whether literally financial commitments that come to a head during this full moon. It might feel like an adventure. It might feel scary. It might feel like you are going into a battle, perhaps literally fighting for your own respect, perhaps fighting for your finances and your ability to survive and take care of yourself. This is also a more internal house, so it might be also more of an internal battle where you are feeling this Martian battle within yourself, the way that you talk to yourself, the way that you act and show up for yourself. And it might not necessarily be a very physical manifestation that you see out there in the world. So those are all of the horoscopes for the 12 zodiac signs. I hope that you can take whatever little pieces of advice, little pieces of wisdom throughout this horoscope and take them with you during this full moon. I will reiterate, there is definitely something beautiful about this Martian energy, about this Aries energy of heading to war. I'm not glorifying war at all, but this idea of being faced with a life or death situation and having this adrenaline to stand up for ourselves. There can be something very beautiful about that energy. So during the full moon on the 17th, take a look at what battles in your life you want to fight at that moment and direct that beautiful Martian energy towards those battles. And don't forget that I do post monthly horoscopes as well. So if you are curious about what the rest of October has in store, then I will link the videos right here so that you can check them out. And then, of course, if you're not aware, I post full moon and new moon meditations here on YouTube for free. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so that in a couple of days, you will catch the meditation, which will help support you during this upcoming full moon. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.